It's not in the face! Thank you.
Hello and welcome to Hey Not the Face with your host John Nash and your producer me, Steffi Haynes. And today we are going to talk about some new filings and updates to the UFC antitrust cases. We are going to weigh in a little bit about TKO's proposed amendments to the Ali Act. We are going to talk about Dana White's interview where he discussed making his first $1 million. We're even going to talk about how much money the Fertittas might have invested into the UFC in the early days. And in our final segment, we are going to discuss Pat McAfee. Bet you never thought you'd hear that on this show. But before we do all of that, I have a few things that I need to say. First and foremost, pick yourself up a paid subscription so that you have access to all of this content, because OG listeners will know that we split every episode in half. Well, almost every episode. Some get given away and some are completely paywalled. But the vast majority of our episodes are split in half, where that you get the first half for free, but the second half is behind a paywall. So you picking up a paid subscription helps you get access to that stuff behind the paywall. Now, the other thing I want to mention is that John put out an excellent video last week, and it goes over the contracts, UFC contracts, and it specifically targets Dana White's claims, his constant claims that the UFC has to offer 3 fights a year to all fighters. And it's a very involved deep dive. It's a full explainer. It's 30 minutes long. And just to clarify the difference in the 2 episodes, because we released an audio only version on Tuesday, and then on Wednesday we released the video. The audio-only version was released only to paid subscribers because they got the whole thing a day early. And they also got access to all of the documentation that you get to see clips of in the video. Now, when we put out the video, we did not include that documentation because that's paywalled content for our, paid subscribers. So if you guys out there are document collectors, that's the other thing you have to realize is that all of our documentation that we include, all those PDFs that John pays for through Pacer, you get access to those only if you're a paid subscriber. We do not give those away for free. Because, John pays for that stuff. So that's another little bonus perk for our paid subscribers. So if you want access to all the good, juicy stuff, please subscribe to us. And we thank you so much. And if you can't afford that, you could still help us out by spreading the shows around. Share them on your social media, Twitter, Blue Sky, YouTube, Instagram, Threads, everywhere, far and wide. Share our work. It helps us too. Thank you so much. Now, John, how the hell are you?
Oh, well, beat. Work took a lot out of me today. We record after work, and I almost didn't make it because I almost had to work late. What the hell's that shit? Work late?
From home?
Yeah. Oh my God. Unacceptable. Unacceptable. It actually was a busy day. I got a couple episodes kicked back to me that I had to re-edit almost completely on the fly. So that was it's been a busy busy beginning of the week. Oof. But enough. It's like being, when you're working in the coal mine like I do on an editing, like when you have to go down deep into the shaft of editing, don't see the light, back-breaking work like I do, it can be tiring. It can really be tiring.
Oh, well, you know what? As long as you don't have the black lung from working down in the coal mines, That's all I care about. We can't have you having the black lung because we know you already have some lung issues.
Yeah, I don't think I would last long in the coal mine.
You know what's funny? I read something that said that the black lung has made a huge comeback since they rolled back all these protections for coal miners. Isn't that crazy? Like, there's been like an 80% resurgence of the black lung disease since all of those protections were rolled back.
Well, that's because, people are nostalgic for the past.
We have Donald Trump, Antoinette in office, let them eat cake and things like that. Only the cake is sawdust and cyclospora.
Yeah. It's just, you miss stuff like that because there's so much shit happening.
Yeah.
It's like I've said, as my brother says, it's a bed of nails theory. With any other president, you'd step on the nail and you go, oh my God, he stepped on a nail. It's a big scandal. Here, it's like a bed of nails just walks over it because there's so much shit. No one pays attention.
Yeah, that's pretty much it. I saw that his approval ratings are down to 33%, the lowest in either one of his presidencies. And
that can't be true. He said he's the most popular president ever.
Yeah,
so you might have to recheck those polls because he said specifically that he's the most popular president ever.
What kind of popularity, though? Not all popularity is good popularity.
He is the most popular president. That's it. Most beloved, the best president ever. So I think you might want to double check your facts there.
Oh my goodness. But anyways, we are going to roll forward with the show. And if you're new here, we always start with the same question. Are there any new filings or updates in the UFC antitrust cases?
Yeah, there were a couple new filings. They're nothing groundbreaking, but they're fairly interesting documents. We will upload them in the paywall section, as Crooklyn noted earlier. So for you guys that pay, they'll be there because I already paid for the goddamn thing on Pacer. So why not you get it as well? But the first one is, and both these I should note are from the Johnson v. Zuffa docket. So they involve all the cases basically, which is Johnson v. Zuffa, Serkinov v. Zuffa, Davis v. Zuffa, because they're all sharing the same discovery, but they're labeled as Johnson v. Zuffa. They're in that docket. And the first document was a dueling statement on the interrogatory limit, and this was filed last week, I believe, Friday. And so the court ordered each side to submit its position after they couldn't agree at the meet and confer. They had a meet and confer and they couldn't agree on anything. So the defendant's position is they want the limit raised from 37 to 90, 50 aside, adopting plaintiff's own count by numbers required responses and methodology. And so an interrogatory to a corporate defendant needing input from multiple custodians would also count per custodian, not as one. And they argue that this is still fewer than what the rules default entitles, which is up to 100 per defendant. And so that's what they're looking there. Specifically, the defendants say they have just, or I should say, the case, we should know, has grown more complex because new counsel has come over for Endeavor. Added since 2023. So we got the original counsel and this new ones for Endeavor, and plus new plaintiffs and defendants because we have that other lawsuit involving the fans. And there's newly discovered facts justify more defendants, according to the defendants. Specifically, the defendants say they have just learned this week that all three Johnson plaintiffs used ephemeral messaging apps not covered by a litigation hold until June 2026. And then the plaintiff's position, which are the fighters, they want the current this 37 per side limit to stay with meet and confer on a showing of good cause if either side needs more. And they call defendants' proposal a bad faith attempt to blow past a 3-year agreement and point out the defendants already tried to serve 87 non-compliant interrogatories back in March 2026 that was later withdrawn, and flatly deny the ephemeral messaging claim, arguing that the plaintiff's apps weren't auto-deleting, weren't used for relevant purposes, and were properly under litigation hold, and they framed the defendant's whole push as a retaliatory campaign to distract from the defendant's own spoliation exposure, which is, Emmanuel Shapiro and Tracy Long. And I should have explained what an interrogatory is, since I brought it up. That is a written question one party in a lawsuit sends to another party, which the receiving party must answer in writing and under oath. So it's one of the formal discovery tools available under what's called, I shouldn't say what's called, what is Federal Rules of Civil Procedure, Rule 33. This is where we need someone like Jason Cruz, who's an actual attorney, to break down the rules. But that's where that comes from. And a few basics, since it's kind of directly relevant to what we've been discussing. It's written, not oral. So unlike a deposition is where it's back and forth in real time. The receiving party gets a set period to write it back. It's sworn. So the answering party has to sign a verification stating that the answers are true. And then it's numerically limited, as we talked about this discussion of how many there's going to be. So that relates to what that whole document is about. So if you were questioning what I was talking about when I was bringing up an interrogatory, that's what I meant by that. Now, on the second document, that is the plaintiff's opposition to defendant's motion to compel document production. And this is the juicier. So if you could load it up, this has more in it. It has exhibits. It's longer. It has some kind of meaner, spicier material in it. And it's basically the mirror image of the signal fight, I should say, playing out in the briefing form. So the defendants here, which are, again, the UFC, Zuffa, Endeavor, they served a broad first RFP back in October of 2023. And an RFP, if you are curious what that is, stands for Request for Production of Documents. They issued that back in October of 2023. The plaintiffs objected and limited production to MMA career relevant materials, and then went silent on follow-up for 18 months. So while defendants completed a 50,000 document production by July 2025 deadline. So to clarify that, the plaintiffs, according to the defendants, not even according to the defendants, according to the courts, the defendants went silent and didn't produce material for 18 months. So the defendants didn't raise any issue with that production for another year until their own signal spoliation came to light. Remember, that involves Emmanuel, Shapiro, Campbell, Whitesell, all found to have signal on devices, and several which were wiped. And this came to light via forensic vendor report back in May 2026 as part of a different lawsuit, the WWE lawsuits. 8 days after those reports dropped, the defendants here, again, Zuffa, the UFC, pivoted and demanded that the plaintiffs, the fighters, produce signal telegram messages, seizing on plaintiffs' own June 18th interrogatory response disclosing they downloaded those apps. So the plaintiff's core argument here is the motion is untimely 3 years after which the request was made, a year after substantial completion, and should be denied on the basis alone under the Ninth Circuit case law. That's defendants never actually met and conferred on the specific production objections before filing. On the merits, plaintiffs say their signal telegram use was investigated and correctly excluded. Johnson used signal only for his post-retirement gym business, scheduling, staff coordination, nothing about the UFC. Tristan Connolly used Telegram occasionally just to send large video files, and CB Dalloway apparently used Signal to talk to his physician's wife about private medical matters, which are privileged and not, are not available for this court, as well as for unrelated personal chats. And then the plaintiffs reject the defendant's rule of reason pro-competitive business theory for why Johnson's gym chat would be relevant. So, and the plaintiffs also argue it's largely moot anyway. The plaintiff said they'd already told defendants back on August 3rd, just a couple weeks ago, they'd begun full file systems extractions before the motion was even filed. And those extractions are now mostly complete. So they'll be available to the defendants going forward. Attached was a couple exhibits, Endeavor's first set of interrogatories, as well as the plaintiff's sworn answers. And so it's what makes this kind of interesting to me is that you look at this filing and it gives a fairly granular sworn account of the plaintiff's signal timeline. And this is useful because you can contrast it against the defendant's spoliation exposure that we've had over the last, we've been discussing for basically a year now. Because the plaintiffs, the key thing is, and this is what the plaintiffs, make a big, strong point about, is that when they were told to hold and hand this over, they immediately did. And they're claiming that the defendants are trying to obscure, their handling of Signal by making a big deal that the plaintiffs also use Signal. But the difference is that the defendants were told ahead of time that they had to preserve that as well as hand it over for discovery, and yet magically apparently seem to delete a lot of it. And so there seems to be a very, I notice a very different handling of their Signal chat, as much as the defendants are trying to pretend that they both did basically the same thing. When in fact the plaintiffs, at least according to the timeline, the plaintiffs immediately preserved it when requested and worked about handing it over to preserve it, where the defendants, I guess they just worked on how they could start bringing up how the plaintiffs are also using Signal, even though they previously didn't ask for it.
Wow. Now, I want to clarify something with you. You said C.B. Dalloway's physician's wife. Did you mean C.B. Dalloway's wife's physician?
Yeah, I believe so, but maybe he has a physician wife too. Maybe his wife's a doctor, but I believe it was his physician's wife. I probably just said that out of order. So I glanced over at the document when I was saying it.
No problem. I just wanted to make sure that we clarify that for listeners. So is there anything else that we need to know from the antitrust cases? That
is a current update. We, a listener, hopefully we'll have as our roving reporter next time. At the next, he seems like he might be able to make it. I don't want to out him, because if he can't make it, I don't want to, I'll be ragging on him later. But he said he might make it to the next status conference, which comes up in a couple of weeks. So, but for right now, that is the only filings we had. There was a court minutes order that came out as well, but we can't see it yet because it just came out. And it looks like it might be just related to minor details that, I don't think there's much interest in the public for the, filing information. Like, oh, we forgot to add this number to it, something like that.
All right. Now, let me ask you this. Are there any new updates to TKO's proposed amendments to the Ali Act? Their Muhammad Ali American Boxing Revival Act. Are there any updates to that since Ted Cruz actually brought that to the Senate?
There is none, and we shouldn't expect any, because right now the Senate is on hiatus. They left a few days ago to go on hiatus, just like the House is on hiatus. The Senate does not get back after September 11th. I think they get back September 14th, but after September 11th, both the House and the Senate get back. So in Congress right now, it is at a halt. And even then, I don't expect much after they get back as well, because we're going to have all the fiscal matters to handle. The question is, basically after the elections, the midterms, will they dive into the Ali Act? And we might get something filed, some update, new version of the bill, whatever, before then. But the big question, do they put them on the calendar at all for Congress? And I would expect that after the elections, because there's just so many other bills that have to go through before. But there is one thing about the Ali Act I think worth highlighting. And this is not anything in Congress, the bill itself. It's that Larry Goldberg over at Boxing Insider. I just want to shout out and point people in this direction. He has just a great series about the Ali Act he's been doing, about this new bill, about various aspects of it. And he had another just a few days ago, which I missed somehow. It must over the weekend, I guess I missed it, called Utopian Unicorns, about, basically what would happen if we pass the John McCain version and the Mark Wayne Mullen versions of the bill. And these are things, listeners of the show know, this is things we've talked about at length, what the John McCain version of the bill, the Professional Boxing Amendment Act, would have done, and what Mark Wayne Mullen's Muhammad Ali Expansion Act would have done for the John McCain. It would have given teeth to the actual original bill. So when people say it's never enforced, well, that had an enforcement mechanism. had stronger mechanisms for tracking fighters and injuries and health and all that stuff, as well as licensing the sanctioning organizations and promoters and everybody, so that this boxing commission would have created has much greater control, much greater enforcement over the entire industry. It would have been a revolutionary change to the business, would have fixed a lot of the shit people complained about for years. And in fact, that was the whole intent of the bill, was to correct all the things that the original Ollie Act failed to do. In other words, mostly the mechanisms for enforcement. And then, of course, Mark Wayne Mullen's bill would have expanded the Ollie Act MMA. And he has numerous other articles. He does a great job of covering it. So I want to suggest that. So, there might not be anything going on in the Senate and Congress right now, but there is a bunch of great articles. If you get a chance to go over to Boxing Insider and read, and it's almost like a great companion piece to some of the previous podcasts we've had.
All right. Now, while we're on the topic, I'm going to ask you an off-the-cuff question. If you had the opportunity to add or subtract one single thing from that bill proposal, that revival act, the one that TKO is trying to push through right now, what would that one singular thing be?
Well, we're going to have to limit it. You mean, let's use the Senate version of the bill, right? Because there's two versions right now, and they haven't been merged. So we got to do the Senate. And can I get rid of the UBO part? Because obviously I think the UBO is what I'd want to eliminate. But I'm guessing you also know I want to eliminate the UBO. So can that be my answer? We're going to eliminate the UBOs?
Well, let's go with two versions. Let's go two tracks. In the first track, yes, you can get rid of the UBO, but in the second track, no, you cannot.
Okay. If I have to keep the UBOs, the one part, I'm going to do two things. I'm going to subtract something and add something all at the same move. I want to subtract the part that says that the UBO is by having a UBO and following all those other rules, you're compliant with the Ollie Act. Get rid of that part, and they still have to follow all the rules of the Ollie Act. That'd be great. And the only other thing I would add then is add a part that says it's considered a restraint on trade to deny any boxer a title fight for a mandatory title. And I think that would have implications. One is the UBOs cannot block fighters from fighting for sanctioning organizations' titles if they wanted to. But also, we wouldn't have broadcast networks and other promoters blocking their fighters from taking title shots, mandatories, because it wouldn't be on their network, because sometimes that happens. There's no rule that says they don't have to do that. Often the fighter will turn down a mandatory offer. But if you add that, the fighter would have an automatic out to their contracts, that they could exit the contract and go fight. As long it was a mandatory for a title shot, they were free to exit their contract. No contract could restrain a fighter from accepting a mandatory bout. That'd be my one addition. I think those two alone would fix a lot of the problems in this bill. But I would still get rid of the UBO.
All right. Now we're going to have more stuff on this particular topic, and we're going to try and incorporate something in at least every other show, but hopefully every show. But we'll see how that plays out, because John has some big plans of his own to put out as well. So keep your eyes peeled and your ears to the ground for that. Now we're going to move on, because recently Dana White gave an interview where he discussed making his first $1 million with the UFC. Do we have information on other payouts he received after that? Because I believe he said it was around 2005 or something.
Yeah, he couldn't remember the exact date. Now, we know the exact date because we actually have a lot of information here. In the Levy-Zuffa case, they did discovery, and part of it, there was Guy Davis, a certified public accountant, was hired by the plaintiffs, the fighters in that case, to do a report to go through all the finances, all the data and finances he was given from the UFC, and compile, various calculations based on that. And he went through, and he basically, in that report, we have all the distributions that the company made to the ownership during the entire life of the company up until 2017. So we have a large amount of material, large amount of numbers, amounts that we know. And I should note Dana White's wrong. One thing to be clear, that this was not that million he got wasn't the first time he got paid from the UFC. He was drawing a salary as an executive since day one in the UFC. What that was the first time he had got $1 million, I guess, distributed, profits from the UFC, is the distribution of profits. And we know also what year that was, because, if we look through on it, people want to pull out their Guy Davis document exhibit from the Levy Zuffa. You can go to page 24 I'm looking at. And if you go back to old episodes, we've uploaded this before. But in that, the first distribution, the first year that they distributed money to the ownership was 2005. Now, the only people got paid that year was the Fertitta brothers, a few million, 4.55 million each. Dana White didn't get paid that year as part of the distributions to equity to the ownership. He got his salary, but he didn't get any capital distribution. The next year, 2006, was the first year he made money from the UFC. That was the year. 2006 is the year they had Tito versus Chuck Liddell at UFC 66. They had, Tito versus Ken Shamrock twice. Remember the one on Spike TV they did? They had just a bunch of big successful pay-per-views that year. Matt Hughes took on Hoist Gracie, came back and got his ass kicked by Matt Hughes. So it was a very big, their breakout year for the UFC. And that year in 2006, the first year there was distributions to Dana White, he got $3.65 million in distributions. Now, we don't know what his executive salary was. I'm guessing it was in the hundreds of thousands. But on top of that, as part of the profit sharing, he got $3.65 million. But this is dwarfed by the next year, because the next year for Dana White, 2007, they took out a $350 million loan, of which something like $250 million of it was used to pay the owners. And Dana White that year in 2007, his distribution was $28.575 million. So he got a pretty healthy chunk that year. And then we know the other years. In fact, we know every year through 2016 what he got. The next year he got 7.2 million, 14.4 million, 28.29 million for 2010. 2011 he got another 8.7 million. 2012 6.1 million. 2013 6.5 million. 2014 4 million. 2015 6.9 million. And then there's the big sale number where he got a couple $100 million. So the man made a lot of money during his time with the UFC, and his total, we can even look at his total amount here. If I glance through this, I think his total distributions from the sale, people forget too, they sold 10% to the United Arab Emirates, to a company in the United Arab Emirates, and that was paid him a ton. The 10%
that was
of that.
Flash Entertainment, right?
Flash Entertainment, yeah, 175 million. Well, they got, to break it down, they got, in 2007, they took out a $350 million loan, of which $250 million they used to pay themselves. The rest was to pay off, to refinance the revolver that they had, revolving loan, and to finance the Purpose of Pride. In 2090, they took out another $100 million, of which $70 million went to paying themselves again. And then in 2010, they sold to Flash for $1.75 billion, I believe it was. And then in 2016, they sold the company to William Morris for a original cash payment of $3.45 billion, a rollover of 19% equity in William Morris, which was valued at $325 million, and then a potential earnout payments of $250 million in 2017 and 18 total. So, you add all that together, and they just, total period, when you summarize all the value of equity that Dana White had, when you add up his pre-class distribution. So from 2005 to 2010, Dana White was paid $82 million from distribution, again, excluding his executive payroll, his executive pay. He got 82 million. And then from 2010 to 2016, he got paid another 33 million, but also made 339 million from the WME sale. So his, you add that all together, and the guy made a lot of money. Let's just put it that way. He made.
So he was half a billionaire already.
Yeah, half a billionaire in cash. So.
Wow. And, would you say he's pretty close to being a billionaire at current?
He has to be, you think, with all the, he's on the Meta board. He's on, he's still probably has some, even though he sold off, I think he was given some equity. Some reports, we don't know exactly, but some reports said he was given some equity in TKO. I'm sure he has his, compensation, but he's invested in all these other things. Unless his gambling problem is so bad. But I don't think it's that bad. I doubt it's that bad. I imagine he has to be, when you look at his houses he owns and everything, the man's got to be worth you got to be approaching $1 billion.
Yeah, I remember when he bought several properties in Las Vegas that were all in the same neighborhood because he wanted to have a compound. Remember that?
Yes.
So, yeah. All right. Now, let me ask you this. Do we have information about what the Fertittas put into the UFC? What was their investment?
Well, we do have this, actually. And this is something you hear the number. I think they always throw out the UFC. The Fertittas were 44 million in the hole. But we have, again, from Guy Davis, he got the material from UFC themselves, and he reported the original equity hold investors' contributions, which are just the Fertittas, and he goes year by year, totaling up what their total investments were, and it was something in the neighborhood of from 2001 to 2005 as the years they invested. Put capital into the UFC. They invested around $36 million total. Then later, in 2012 and 13, they put, even though they were getting...
To access the bonus content of this episode, you must be a paid subscriber. To do that, go to heynottheface.substack.com and subscribe today.
Ow! Ow! Not the face! Ooh! Okay, the face!